In tonight's Dateline Defense, the U.S. military enhances communication capabilities as terror suspects adjust to a new reality. This week, a Delta IV rocket took off from Cape Canaveral. It contains a wideband satellite system. Officials say that system will extend the coverage between the U.S. and its international partners. Joining me tonight with more on Capitol Insider is Cedric Leighton. He's a military intelligence officer, retired U.S. Army Air Force colonel, and president of CedricLeighton Associates. Cedric, tell us more about the Delta IV. Why is this launch significant?
Well, the Delta IV, of course, is the booster rocket, Morris, that is taking the satellite up into space. The real thing that's really important here is that this is part of a constellation of communications satellites called WGS, and basically it's a wideband satellite system that allows the U.S. government to talk not only in one band, the X band of satellite communication, but also in the Ka band of satellite communication. It also is a 10 times greater throughputer of data, if I can use that term, which allows greater data, allows more video conferencing between commanders, and it also allows a lot of different intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance data points to come across, and it is a very, very effective system. Right now, there's supposed to be about 10 satellites that are going to go up. This is the 6th one of those satellites, so they've got 4 more to go before they have a complete constellation.
Last week, U.S. intelligence officials intercepted what they call a secret message between al-Qaeda leaders. It involved plans for a major attack. The U.S. closed 19 embassies, evacuated personnel, and put drones in the air. Today, a suspected U.S. drone strike in Yemen killed 6 alleged al-Qaeda militants. Do we have any indication, Cedric, that the group has changed its approach to communication in light of NSA leaker Edward Snowden?
Well, there are some indications from statements that have been made by NSA officials and other government officials that the terrorists have in fact changed the way that they communicate. Now, it is normal for them to do that. Once there are revelations of this type, we saw this in the early 2000s when the satellite phone intercept capabilities were revealed for Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden changed all of his ways of communicating at that particular point in time. And in this particular case, we can expect to see that it'll of electronic communication that we haven't quite been able to discern yet.
Probably back to snail mail too, but they still have to have that instant communication, so it's got to be telecom at some point, doesn't it?
It usually does, yes, and the reason for that, of course, is because they want to be able to orchestrate terrorist attacks, for example, or other ways of communicating for other reasons, for other operational reasons. And when they do that, what they're going to do is they're going to find ways to communicate very quickly. They might use something called steganography, which in essence is burying messages inside other data, for example, on websites or in emails that are not readily apparent to a casual observer.
Good point. Now, for al-Qaeda, prisons seem to be a new focus. In July, the group set hundreds of inmates free in Iraq, Libya, and Pakistan, and also threatened Guantanamo. What's going on here? Well,
prison breaks are a favorite al-Qaeda pastime, if you will. What they do is they target prisons, and prisons in the Arab world and throughout the Middle East are notorious for lax security, for having lax security. And in this particular case, of course, al-Qaeda has been able to find a lot of weak points in the prison systems in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and other Middle Eastern countries. And that really is a very dangerous situation because the people that have been sprung from these prisons are basically the terrorists that we're seeking to imprison or to keep at least out of harm's way. In other words, that they are the ones that are not in our sights, but they are locked up. And in this particular case, now that they're no longer locked up, they are free to roam about the country, and they're free to take care of a lot of operational details that al-Qaeda would otherwise have to give to others, less experienced people.
They're already vetted. They get new members, new jihadists who have already been vetted because they're criminals.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on. You're also tracking diplomatic relations between President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is, of course, that President Obama has declined to meet one-on-one with President Putin, and Putin is looking at ways in which he can really thwart the U.S. on multiple fronts. The latest thing that he has done is he has actually had a major exercise, a major military exercise that he observed in part part in the Soviet or in the Russian Far East. And what that means is we're going back to the old Soviet way of doing things in many respects. Not completely, obviously, but there are certain aspects of military power that Russia is trying to project. There are certain ways that they're trying to show that they are in fact a great power, and in order to do so, they're going to tweak the nose of the United States as much as they can, and Snowden was a perfect way for them to do so.
So do you think this is a Russia problem, a Putin problem, or let me say this, could it be an Obama problem? Maybe we've got some faults here too? What?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of all of the above, but primarily it's a Russia problem because Russia believes its strategic interests are covered by certain very legitimate, in their view, ways of looking at the world. They don't want to have themselves encircled. They want to make sure that the way they handle things allows them a degree of freedom of movement that they don't normally have. Although Russia has a lot of seacoast, it is in essence, in terms of trade routes, a fairly landlocked place. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to gain access to sea routes that they otherwise would not have. One way through to do that is through Turkey, so they're improving their relationship with Turkey. The other thing that they're trying to do is affect change in Asia, and what they're doing there is they're actually having a transit point between China and Western Europe that goes through Russia, and that really is a railroad-based system that had it sent its first test train to Berlin in the last few weeks. And what that does is it allows for greater trade between Western Europe and China, but of course it all goes through Russia, and the Russians see that as their future.
Cedric, I don't know what happened to flower power, but the world is getting increasingly more complicated.
It is,
Cedric
most
Leighton,
certainly.
President of the Cedric Leighton Associates, thanks for being with us on Capital Insider, Cedric.
My pleasure, Morris. Thanks for having me.